Alex Ovechkin passes Wayne Gretzky for most 40-goal NHL seasons.
Your Locked On Capitals, your daily podcast on the Washington Capitals. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, hello and welcome into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me today. As always, this podcast is free and available on all the major platforms, and I want to thank you for making this your first listen or view of the day. Yes, this podcast is also available in video form, so head on over to YouTube and check it out. My name is Dan Holney. You can find me on Twitter. It's at DanCaps218. You can find the show on Twitter. It's at Locked On Caps. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit fanduel.com/locked on today to get started. So in this edition of Locked On Capitals, we talk about the special ceremony for Alex Ovechkin, a pregame ceremony to honor Alex Ovechkin for moving into second place on the all-time goals list. And then also Alex Ovechkin passes Wayne Gretzky for most 40-goal NHL seasons. Then later in the show, we will talk about the Caps as they fall to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And then in the final segment, we will talk about what this team should do going forward. But just to get it going here, the game started with so much optimism and just a highlight reel. They had Nick Backstrom doing spoken word behind the whole thing, just kind of talking about Alex Ovechkin's monumental career and just his standout season. As we know, he breaks records pretty much every time he is out on the ice, and tonight was no exception. The evening began with a pregame ceremony to honor Alex Ovechkin for moving into second place on all-time goals list. Ovechkin overtook the Hall of Famer Gordie Howe for sole possession of the second most goals in NHL history on December 23rd. And then he did what he would normally do. And I'll talk about the game a little bit more later in the show, but he responded in true fashion by scoring the game opening goal 5 minutes into the first period. And God thank Alex Ovechkin for being on this team this year, because there's not a lot of bright spots, guys. I got to be honest with you. And, just kind of taking a look at a lot of different things, I thought this one was going to be penciled in as a win. Wasn't the case, but the bright spot for me was just that really great ceremony for Alex Ovechkin as they just kind of really rolled out the red carpet. His wife was out there. His brother was out there. His kids were there with him, the ownership group. They had a good spoken word thing, Master of Ceremonies by Joe Beninati. It was just a really top-notch thing, and all kinds of good feelings, some, warm and fuzzies as you watch it, as you are a Capitals fan for a long time. And, just kind of they played some of his best goals to start off the night. And it just kind of brought you back to those moments. And just Joe Beninati and John Walton's voice just are kind of the soundtrack of his career. It was just a really special evening. Let's kind of just forget about the loss and just concentrate on the great night for Alex Ovechkin, and just kind of to commemorate his many accomplishments of passing Gordie Howe, who was number 2 all time in goals scored. The only person that lies in front of him is Wayne Gretzky. And I saw an interesting video piece to start off the show. He was talking with Elliot Friedman. He said it would not be possible to catch Wayne Gretzky. I'm not sure when that video was from, but now he is closing in on it. So crossing your fingers and toes. If you take a look at many different charts online, it's saying that he should be able to do it in the 24 or 25 season, or 24/25 season, I guess I should say, as long as he can stay healthy, because, he is getting to be a bit of an older guy. He is in peak condition. As you can see out on the ice, the guy is built like a brick mountain, shall we say. So I think that he is a tough guy. I think that he has what it takes. It's just those kind of injuries that you can anticipate, those lingering injuries. And we know that he's missed games here as of late, or maintenance days, those kind of things. So those are definitely things that could derail his hopes of doing greater things. But a really great ceremony by the Washington Capitals organization, and just really put well together from front to back. A+ marks on the Caps organization for the recognition of Alex Ovechkin, and just a really special evening for Ovi and the fans and the organization as well. Also, Alex Ovechkin passes Wayne Gretzky for most 40-goal NHL seasons. The story in The Athletic: Washington Capitals winger Alex Ovechkin passed Wayne Gretzky for the most 40-goal seasons in an NHL career. Ovechkin scored the goal 5:12 into the first period against the Blue Jackets. It came on a wrist shot off a pass from Tom Wilson. The Russian now has 13 40-goal seasons, the most in NHL history. Gretzky is second with 12, followed by Marcel Dion and Mario Lemieux with 10 each. Ovechkin has 820 goals in NHL goals. So just a really great night. It wasn't the result that they were looking for. Obviously, it would have been good if they would have been able to continue to ride that momentum into the win column, and it just wasn't the case. It's been a difficult year for Ovechkin. His father, Mikhail, passed away in February. He missed a total of 6 games for a while attending the funeral in Moscow, and a couple more due to a nagging injury. And of course, the team he leads and almost is certain to miss the playoffs for the first time since 2014. So it had to be kind of an interesting evening for Alex Ovechkin out there, as it seems like his career his trajectory is just aimed straight up. The Capitals team, however, is kind of not doing that. They're kind of more in a nosedive, if you will. Despite the hurdles, he's managed to keep doing what he does best and do it at a high level. Ovechkin joins Connor McDavid, David Pastrnak, Mikko Rantanen, Leon Draisaitl, Braden Point, Tage Thompson, and Jason Robertson as the only players to hit the 40-goal plateau this season. And he is doing that at at being 37 years old. He is continuing to be in the same conversation as a Connor McDavid, a Pastrnak, Draisaitl, Braden Point, Tage Thompson, these younger guys for the most part. He is still in that same conversation, and just it speaks volumes of who Alex Ovechkin is, and kind of the one saving grace of this season, despite what happens. And we know that the arrow's pointing down for their hopes of making it to the playoffs. But for me, what we watched was just a really it was a great evening to commemorate Alex Ovechkin and his many accomplishments, and we hope, obviously, that he can continue to keep doing that. Ovechkin passed Howe earlier this season for number 2 on the NHL career goals list. Gretzky remains atop the list with 894. Ovechkin becomes the 4th player in NHL history to score 40 or more goals at 37 or older. Howe, Johnny Boychuk, and Braden Shanahan are ahead of that. So just taking a look at that, it is quite an elite company to be in, but we're just hoping that he can continue to go on that same path, and we look forward to him breaking that milestone. Again, the 24-25 season that you will want to be around your television or computer, laptop, whatever the case is when that happens. And of course, we won't know when it happens, just like when he passed Gordie Howe, it was just like, boom, and here we are. He was a bit snake bitten for a while there, but just to see him pass these milestones, for me as a Caps fan, that is a redeeming quality in this season above and beyond anything else. And I think to a certain extent, if you are a Caps fan, that's what you got to kind of lean on right now, is the small things, and that's one of them, is Ovi continuing to crush it out there. All right, so after the break here, we will talk about the game tonight against the Blue Jackets. What are the games that I had penciled in as a win? It seemed like a no-brainer, but it wasn't the case. What went wrong? We'll talk about it next. The tournament is heating up, and now is the perfect time to download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to points, scores, and threes drained. And guys, even if you're not into betting, you could bet on an upcoming Wizards game. It makes watching the games that much more exciting. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger game payout with a same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked fanduel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. In this next segment here, we are going to talk about the Caps as they fall to the Columbus Blue Jackets. And like I talked about off the top there was so much optimism, so much positivity about this game. I just, I thought to myself that they're going to win this one, and they got on the board, and then they had a convincing lead, and then it all fell apart. I'm thinking to myself, this can't be happening. The Columbus Blue Jackets, the deplorable Columbus Blue Jackets, and they found a way to lose this one. Again, dashing any hopes of making it to the playoffs. You lose to St. Louis, to Minnesota, to the Columbus Blue Jackets, and it doesn't really seem like there's any positivity that they're going to be able to beat the Blackhawks or any of these other teams, because if you can't find a way to beat the Columbus Blue Jackets, this year's Columbus Blue Jackets in particular, that is pretty bad. And it's not like they didn't get run support, to use a baseball term. Nick Jensen got 2 goals. Sonny Milano got a goal. TJ Oshie, Alex Ovechkin, and Connor Sherry all found the back of the net. They just weren't able to find a way to close it out and to find a way to win the game, because even though they had a pretty convincing lead throughout the game, they found a way to give it up. And it seems like we've seen this movie before. This team cannot finish, and they struggle. One of the things I talked about when I tweeted when I was at the Wild game, this team is a mess. Mac better have a mop to help clean it up in the offseason, because I see that there should be all kinds of changes. I've spoke on this show about head coaching. I think that it ultimately will happen. Not really my assessment that it's the right thing to do, but it's just things are so rough on this team right now that there's very few players on this team, in my assessment, that are untouchable after this season. I think that you're going to see Brian McClellan make some big changes. Of course, the nucleus, we know who we're talking about there. They're not going to move, but some of these tertiary players, they might. Some of these guys that are kind of on the fringe of being in that nucleus, those guys might be out, because, could you imagine bringing this team back who's playing this well? And I hear all kinds of comments on Twitter, and they can't trade this guy. They can't trade that guy. They're so important to this team. This team cannot win games to save their life this year. This is the first time they've missed the playoffs in many, many years. It goes back to the Adam Oates era. So there is going to need to be big changes that are going to need to be made. There's no argument. Do you want to take this same lineup and put them on the ice in the fall next year and expect a different result? I don't. I think that is sheer craziness. And that's why I think the Caps are probably going to make some big changes. That's my assessment anyway. If you just take a look at it, and again, if you see them, kind of just taking all these players out there and doing it again, it just doesn't seem like the right idea. The Capitals had fallen into a dangerous narrative over the last few games with slow starts by too little, too late pushes, leading to tough losses. Head coach Peter Laviolette promised a better start on Tuesday. In the presser, he even told everyone in the press corps, go ahead and write this down. And the team delivered. However, things fell apart as the team experienced the inverse of the problem they faced of late. And though Nick Jensen had played hero late, the Jackets were able to claw back, and it led to a collapse for DC, writes Sammy Silver of Washington Hockey Now. And why weren't they able to find a way to close? These are the things that are so difficult for me to watch. It's not like you were playing the Bruins. It's not like you were playing the Hurricanes or the Rangers. This team is about as poor as it gets, and they found a way to lose. I don't want to make this podcast all negativity, but what I'm saying here, and I'll talk about it in the final segment, is just expect big changes, and they might not be the changes that you want. Jensen struck twice, and Ovi got a goal on his celebration night, but things spiraled out of control in a 7-6 OT loss. And if you take a look at it, moneypuck.com is kind of the benchmark to look for on playoff hopes. Last time I checked it, it was 0.4% chance of the Caps making it to the playoffs. So let's go ahead and say it's a pretty remote chance that that's going to be the case. So what do we do going forward? For me, and I've talked about this, and I'll talk about it a little bit later in the show, it's about assessing talent and who is going to be on this team going forward. Do they ultimately have anyone in Hershey that could benefit from playing on the big team. I listened to John Walton and Tarek El-Bashir this morning on their podcast, or it's John Walton's podcast, and Ben Raby, he wasn't on there today, but he was talking about, and Tarek were talking about that don't plan on, the Caps calling up a bunch of guys from Hershey because this team still wants to win games and blah, blah, blah. And this team that's out on the ice and this group of players out on the ice gives them the best chance of winning games. Oh, really? Oh, really? Did you see them drop to the Blues? Did you see them drop to the Wild? Did you see them drop to the Columbus Blue Jackets? Give me a break, you guys. I mean, I know that you're towing the company line there, but for me, I would say call someone up from Hershey to see what they have in the tank. Let's get a Connor McMichael up there. Let's get some of these. Let's get Vinny Iorigo back up there. It just seems to a certain extent for me that they just kind of, Dylan Strome seems like a solid pickup, but could there have been better? Sonny Milano, same thing. I know they found the score sheet tonight, but they need elite players. What am I talking about? Why don't you take a look at the Boston Bruins? That is elite. Elite. And the Capitals were once in that category at one time, not too long ago. How have they fallen down this far? As a Caps fan, I'm sorry, I'm just a little bit frustrated. How did this happen? This team has been a premier hockey team for almost as long as Ovi's been in the league, and they have just spiraled out of control. So you're asking me, I'm going to tell you, Peter Laviolette has probably played his or coached his last season as the Caps for the Capitals. Do I think it's the right thing to do? No, but you take a look at Adam Oates, he got the boot after they missed the playoffs. So, if history is any kind of lesson for the future, that's probably going to be the case. But is it going to get the Capitals to win? Probably not. After a slow start, the Jackets started piling on the pressure and winning key battles to get quality scoring chances. Columbus pulled within one twice and also started to shift the tempo in the second period. It paid off as the Caps started to run out of steam in the second half. And things fell apart as the Jackets rallied back to even the score 5-5 in the third, though Jensen made it 6-5. Boone Jenner tied it with less than a minute left and forced OT, where Columbus Blue Jackets prevailed on a Jack Raclovic goal. And he was kind of all over the place. And that was the tough thing out there for the Caps, is this team that is still, they're fighting for pride, for the pride on the front of their jersey. They're fighting for future jobs. And you got to think that a lot of these guys, even though that Columbus Blue Jackets team this year is horrendous, they still take a lot of pride in that team and, pride in themselves as well. They want to do well at the end of the day. There were some bright spots out there. TJ Oshie, since returning from the NHL All-Star break, Oshie has put on a show and has led the Caps in scoring with 18 points. In 19 games, he had another multi-point outing on Tuesday, picking up his 19th goal of the season and adding an assist. In addition to the 36-year-old, Milano picked up a goal and an assist, while Wilson potted 2 assists for 4 points in his last 4 outings. Strome has also stepped up as he added a major helper and now has points in 8 of his last 9 contests. So it is not all doom and gloom. Just listen to those stats that I listened to, or I rattled off there. TJ Oshie killing it. Sonny Milano playing well, and Connor Sheary finding the back of the net, while Wilson getting 2 assists as well. It's not like the team, you want to put them in, in a recycle bin. It's just, for whatever reason, some of the players aren't working. And, one of the things that Brian McClellan said about this team is they need an elite scorer other than Ovi, right? He can't do it all. And I think that's my assessment of the team as well. I would not be surprised in the offseason if they don't, throw a Hail Mary pass, kind of like they did for Darcy Kemper, and pick up that elite forward to really help bolster this team. I'm talking A-list scorer. It's got to be done. There's not this, the DC fan base, the Caps fan base, they will not tolerate this. They're used to success, and I think that heads will roll to an extent after this season. Whose heads those are, I guess it remains to be seen. But that's my takeaway from this game. This was a game that the Capitals should have won, in all caps. Should have won. And they found a way to lose. And I want to put a shiny finish on it here. And I, rattled off some stats of some guys that played really well. And I'll sing the praises of TJ Oshie until the cows come home. I saw him play in Minnesota a couple nights ago. If he was out on the ice, he was involved. He was involved in scoring. He was involved in being a playmaker. He was wanting to fight the whole gosh darned Minnesota Wild team when Evgeny Kuznetsov got hit. He is a heart and soul player on steroids. And I can't say enough about him. Tom Wilson, I love the guy. I think he's going to be the future captain of the team. It's just certain pieces, certain things need to change if this team has any hopes of doing anything even next year or the years to come. All right, so after the break here, we will talk about the change that needs to be made and what is the remainder of the season. How should we view it if the Capitals are ultimately out of the running? How should they proceed? I'll give you my thoughts after the break. No matter how the game was last night, anytime you take the field, you've got a shot at greatness. Give your team the best shot at winning by recruiting more MVPs with Indeed. If you're hiring, you need Indeed because Indeed is the hiring partner where you can attract, interview, and hire all in one place. And Indeed is the only job site where you're guaranteed to find quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements or else you don't pay. Instead of spending hours on multiple job sites hoping to find candidates with the right skills, you have one powerful hiring partner that can help you do it all. Indeed partners you on every step of the hiring process. Find great talent through time-saving tools like Indeed Instant Match, assessments, and virtual interviews. With Instant Match, as soon as you sponsor a post, you get a short list of quality candidates with resumes on Indeed that match your job descriptions, and you can invite them to apply right away. Plus, you only have to pay for quality applicants that meet your must-have requirements. One of the things I love about Indeed is that if you're hiring, you don't need to send out paper applications. You don't need to, have your HR coordinator wasting all these time sifting through these. You need Indeed. It is the premier destination for hiring. So if you own a business and you're hiring, you need Indeed. Start hiring right now with a $75 sponsored job credit to upgrade your post at Indeed.com/locked-on. Offer valid through March 31st. Go to Indeed.com/locked-on to claim your $75 credit before March 31st. Indeed.com/locked-on. Terms and conditions apply. Need to hire? You need Indeed. All right, welcome back into this edition of Locked On Capitals. I'm so glad you decided to join me in this following segment here. We're going to talk about what the Capitals need to do going forward because we know that, all the playoff hopes have pretty much been dashed. Any hopes or aspirations or anything of making it to the playoffs have kind of faded. And, there was, if you take a look at like a heart monitor, beep, 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 the heart monitor was getting pretty week, earlier in the season. And then we made it to the trade deadline and they picked up Rasmus Sandin and they made this move and they made that move. And you thought, well, maybe, some of these players, maybe Rasmus Sandin, maybe, this guy coming back from the injured list, maybe it can help jumpstart this team, but it wasn't the case. Best laid plans go to waste. And, even Alex Ovechkin back, there was all the stats out there that said the Caps play horrible. They don't win games when he's not in the lineup. And it's true, they don't. But even Ovi can't save this team in every night in and night out, as we saw the last couple games. Lord knows he's tried. You take a look at the game against the Minnesota Wild. He tried to do it. It wasn't enough. It wasn't a team pulling on that collective rope, invested in winning games. And it's my belief that if they ultimately do cut ties with Peter Laviolette, it shouldn't stop there. I mean, and I hate to say it because I do the show for him, but Blaine Forsythe, how many years have we seen that guy behind the bench? Is he really that great? And all the rest of the guys that are behind the bench, I cover other podcasts for other sporting teams as well. And that's been my assessment on those teams too, is that if you're going to cut the head coach, you may as just wipe that slate completely clean and start all over again. I'm kind of warming more to the idea because it doesn't matter that I want Peter Laviolette to come back. I'm not the GM. I'm just a guy that hosts a podcast. It seems to be that there's more circulation and rumors going out there that this is probably ostensibly Peter Laviolette's last season. So if that is in fact the case, then let's just cut it down all the way down to the bottom. I want Forsythe and the rest of the assistant coaches gone, and let's just start all over again. Just kind of remember back to when Barry Trotz came here and he brought Mitch Korn, the goalie whisperer, and how that just, totally transformed this team. That's what the kind of transformation that this Capitals team needs right now. It needs a Barry Trotz revival like I've never seen before. And Mitch Korn, if those guys that just, were so integral and so important in the year that the Caps won the Stanley Cup in 2018. In 2018, how time flies. It just seems like it was a couple years ago, but oh my gosh, when you take a look at the calendar, it's been a lot longer than we think. And those players on the team are getting older and older. So there are changes that need to be made. There is no doubt. Do they have viable options in Hershey? We hear the Hendricks Lapierre. We hear the Connor McMichael, Vinny Iario, and just a laundry list of other players. Are they ever going to live up to potential? Will they ever find a spot on this Capitals team? Or are we just going to collectively keep kicking that can down the road that, McMichael and Lapierre will be good some year. And I'm not saying that they are the answer, but I'm just saying that if we covet these players like they are pieces of gold in a bank somewhere. If they're not living, if their evaluation isn't as great as it once was, are they valuable to this team? And I'm not trying to answer that question. I'm posing a question to you guys as Caps fans. If Connor McMichael and Hendricks Lapierre, are they valuable? If that is in fact the case, then let's give them their opportunity next year. But if for some reason we feel like their value has been diminished, then maybe we should move on. Maybe we should try to get someone that will help this team win. Because I don't know about you. If you want to take a look at the Nationals, for example, and the rebuild that's going on there, I ultimately don't know what's going to go on there. It might be great. I know that they got some pieces in place, but I don't think the DC fan base needs another team that's in turmoil. And you take a look at the Washington, the Commanders as well, right? So there's all kinds of uncertainties surrounding DC sports out there. So it is interesting, for me to see how the Caps do proceed. But that is my assessment that is how you should view the rest of this season. Just take those hopes of making it to the playoffs and just flush them down the toilet because that's where they belong. It's almost mathematically impossible. Not quite there yet, but darn close. There's, they only play, through the second week of April, and then that's the end of the regular season, and then the Caps are going to be setting up tea time. So it would seem, advantageous for the Capitals to assess the players that they have on the team, and then also maybe call up some of these guys from Hershey, see how they play on the big team. Because if your playoff hopes are dashed, what do you ultimately have to lose? Nothing. And that's what my thought is going forward, because there's just not enough runway to try to take this Caps team off the ground and get them into the playoffs. And even if they were able to back their way in, even say they were able to sneak their way in, like a sneak attack, they would fall flat on their face in the first round of the playoffs. There is no doubt in my mind. This team just does not have it. I had question marks about the team last year. I have no question marks about this team this year. And I know I've been up and down on this team because, to be honest with you, this team has been up and down. I'm not going to whistle to you that this team is doing well. I'm not going to, whisper in your ear that, man, this Capitals team's pretty good. They're not playing that well right now. And I'm going to be honest with you. And that's going to be what I'm always going to do on this show. I'm going to be honest with you guys about my thoughts on this team. And that is my assessment on this team right now. It should be about future mode right now, starting tomorrow, future mode. Off season, they can make that coaching decision. I don't want to touch it. My knee jerk, sticking my finger in the air. I think Laviolette's done. But if they're going to do it, tear it all down, take it all the way down to the studs, start all over with a new coaching system. Who is that head coach going to be? I have no idea. But what I think is, before they do fire Laviolette, which seems like it's looming, we're just waiting for the end of the season and he's going to get his walking papers, is have someone in mind. I hate when GMs fire a head coach and then they say, well, who's going to replace him? Well, we have some candidates, but we're not really sure yet. That is just trying to appease ownership. That is him trying to say, Ted Leonsis is probably going to sit down with Brian McClellan and go, Brian, let's have a talk. This season didn't go according to the script, did it? What changes are you going to make? I tell you what I did. I fired Peter Laviolette. Took care of that. And my answer to him would be, that's great. Who did you replace him with? Well, no one yet. I have some ideas. That is poor GMing, and I know that this is kind of reading into things, but I just ultimately see that is the trend. That's the way they're going. I would be most surprised to see Peter Laviolette behind the bench next year. Again, winningest U.S. born coach. I don't think it's ultimately his fault, but that doesn't matter. I'm not making the decision. I just see that is where the Caps are headed. But I also see a lot more changes as far as that's not just it. I see big changes as far as players as well. Like I spoke of, I think the nucleus is intact, but after that, I'm not so sure. Thank you for making Locked On Capitals your first listen today. Now make your second listen Locked On Game to Game NHL. Every moment, every top performance, every result. Locked On Game to Game covers every game across the NHL with local analysis that only Locked On can deliver. Follow Locked On Game to Game NHL, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you find your podcast. And guys, I love talking Capitals hockey with you guys on this podcast, whether it be YouTube or audio form. How would you like to talk to me about Capitals hockey one-on-one? Well, you can do that on subtext. Just take a look at the show description. I will put a link on there how we can text back and forth about our thoughts on the Capitals. Who should they draft? Who should they pick up in the free agency? It should be so exciting. It'll be exciting for me. I think it'll be exciting for you as well. Also, go to YouTube and hit that subscribe button. We're at 460 subscribers. Let's see if we can get that up to 500. I have you guys to thank. All right, once again, thank you for joining me on this edition of Locked On Capitals, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Dan Holme, and I'll talk to you again next time.